What's going on? What's going on? Good evening. What made me go short on coin? Honestly, I thought that we would see a big run up, which we did. And then I just felt as if the trading volume overall would be down with crypto in general, right? I mean, like, kind of the biggest, it's not the crypto craze we had last quarter, right? With, or the last 2 quarters with Doge and all those things. So I think the next quarter will be better for coin, but in general, I thought this would be a slower quarter for them. I figured we would get a nice run up just because, Bitcoin is at all-time highs and things of that nature. But, in general, I really thought that they would kind of miss on the, consensus estimate, right, from the street. And so, yeah. I am going to redo the small account challenge for sure. Yeah, it's been a super long day, guys. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But, yeah, it's definitely been a super long day. I didn't sell CBET yet. It obviously got crushed on that. I took like a 58% loss or something like that. But it definitely hurt. But I'm going to kind of hope that the EV battery theme kind of comes into play over the next couple days. And then I'll try to sell it for a not as large of a loss. But, yeah. Definitely, I own it. CBAT definitely kind of caught a loser on that one. So, yep. Yeah, I mean, the market definitely took a breather today for sure overall. But Tesla obviously kind of dictated the market today, right? So we saw how, Tesla was down 12% today. And obviously that had a serious effect on a lot of plays. And definitely affected a lot of plays off open as well. So, yeah, I'll go over what happened today for sure. So if you guys don't know, in the room, obviously there's like a classification for every call. There's high confidence, medium confidence, and low confidence, or, a lotto, right? Each one of those warrants how much of my account I put into something, right? So like a, high confidence play is going to be roughly 10% of my account, and medium confidence is 5 to 7%, and then a lotto is less than 1%, usually like 0.5%. So very, very small. And I'm still in mono, yeah. Mono is kind of like a longer term swing play for me in the crypto space. I'm honestly trying to manage less positions, but there's been so many opportunities. I'm trying to be exposed to the things that are running. Today was way too much. Definitely overtraded. So, and had like too many things open at once. But I'm hoping so. Hoping so on Tesla. So, gonna give everyone about 1 more minute to get in. I'm just gonna kind of take general questions from the live chat until then. How often do I use option flow? On days like today, I'll use flow a decent amount, right? Where today's like generally more flat. That's why I took the AMD calls. I saw a lot of really nice flow on the AMD midday, and then I took those calls, and obviously didn't work out. I actually took a pretty solid loss on AMD. I gave my gains from the previous 2 AMD trades, which sucked, but it was just over trading. That's all it was. I realize that now. A lot of people asking if I have multiple setups. I just have one ultra wide monitor, my watch list, a main chart, and then 2 secondary charts. I try not to focus on too many names at once. A lot of trades that I'm in, I'll let them work a little bit. But I don't try to focus on too many trades. That was kind of my biggest Achilles heel today. Just too many trades. I sold VLTA off open. I tweeted it. I sold over half my position off open. It was up 156% from ads yesterday. I think we were adding at like 35. I got filled at 68 off open today. It was a really nice trade. I said that, and then I stopped out on the remaining calls afterwards on the Tesla flush. So Tesla obviously kind of brought all the EVs down today. So I sold VLTI off open today. I don't use scanners to narrow my watch list. I trade the same 20 to 25 stocks every single day or, every week, right? So I try not to trade things that I'm not familiar with. I find that I have more success with names that I've traded over and over again. If I'm in 3 trades, then I'll have one on secondary chart, one on the other secondary chart, and then whatever trade I'm heaviest in or is my main focus, I'll have on the main chart. All right, guys, going to go ahead and get started in 1 minute. Yeah. All right, guys. Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and get started. It is 8:43. Kind of give everyone about 10 minutes to get in. So hopefully everyone is in. I posted the link on Twitter to the video. So want to get started. Obviously, guys, welcome. It is another Technical Tuesday. It is Tuesday, November 9th. Definitely a longer market day today, guys. I'm going to go over the kind of overall market action first, and then I'll hop into, obviously, today is a special edition stream, and we are going to go over candlesticks and how to read them and what they mean. And I know that this is a big topic for a lot of people that don't really know how to read candles as well. And I think that can be really helpful. I'm going to try to go over some candles from today's trades as well as a few others that I find to be really good examples and talk about how I use them, etc. So hopefully you guys enjoy. I think this can be really beneficial for learning how to trade candlesticks better and obviously improving your trading overall, right? Because this is a big part of what we do. Reading the chart is one of the most important things in this game, and obviously knowing how to read candles can be extremely beneficial, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and start going over today's action, guys. Obviously, a really big flush off open. Today, I really had really high hopes going into it. EVgo was up like 35% off open. Super quick pop off the open. And then, guys, Tesla took a huge dive off open. Obviously, it was a complete dictator of market action today, guys. This was the open candle, guys, and this is a quite the example of an open candle, right? So as you can see, Tesla opened the day at 11.75, and guys, we saw about a $130 sell-off in roughly, the first 30 minutes, right? So this is the 30-minute time frame if I'm on, if you're following along at home. And I kind of want to show you guys why we saw the pullback in all those stocks today, right? Like Riot got absolutely crushed off the open. LCID, huge flush, right? And everybody's like, okay, why is this happening? All this stuff, right? Well, guys, something that I probably should have been more prepared for, but the market needed to cool down, right? Like we've had an enormously hot 2 days. That's why I tweeted last night is like keeping the gains is harder than getting them, right? Like after a day like yesterday on Monday, super, super hot, right? Like everything is working. And then today you get something like that off the open. And that's kind of to be expected, right? I honestly was expecting a little bit more continuation. However, we saw the pullback. Tesla was completely dictating the market. And what we saw was this massive sell-off, right? And Tesla broke a pretty big support, right? And once it broke below this 1132 level, guys, we saw a massive sell-off. I'm going to look at the 5-minute candles quickly just to kind of illustrate a little bit better of an example, right? But, once we broke this level, it was a nonstop sell, right? And then we tried to come back up and build some support in the 1100 area. Couldn't hold that level, and then we just saw it continued selling, right? And I did take some Tesla calls off the 1025 area. Those paid fairly well in power hour. I personally think Tesla will bounce tomorrow. I'd be very surprised if it gives up the $1,000 level. I think that's a pretty big psychological level to hold. It's also a major breakout level to hold if we look at the hourly chart. Tesla's really got to bounce here, right? If it doesn't, then we're going to see a pretty large correction, possibly down to the 940-ish level. But overall, guys, if you're wondering why we saw the flush today, why we saw such ugly market action, and Tesla was a big part of it, right? Like it was a major factor in the action we saw. A lot of names were following it, right? Like LCID, even AMD was kind of, a little bit subject to the Tesla action. So yeah, it was tough. I want to go over Riot. I'm going to kind of transition here into the candlestick part of the segment, right? Guys, this is such an important concept to grasp, right? Like understanding what the candlestick means can be extremely beneficial. Is it the most important thing? Probably not, right? Like learning how to read key levels and support and resistance is extremely important. But if you're going to try to trade the open like I do, then you need to know how to trade candlesticks and understand, what they mean and how they dictate the action that we see, right? So a fantastic example of this, and the reason I'm using it is because I'm assuming a lot of people were in Riot this morning, right? If we look at the 30-minute chart on Riot, and the reason I'm using the 30-minute is because it's going to give us kind of a broader overview of the action we saw today, right? The 5-minute can be a little bit, how do we say, a little bit deceiving, right? Because, it's not illustrating the true picture. The 30-minute is going to give us kind of a broader overview, right? So this is the open, right? If you're on Webull, obviously at 9:30, right, we see this massive gap up. That's where I took the calls. They worked for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we saw a major flush, guys. And the reason that I had my stop, and this is going to be the first lesson in the candlestick video, is the reason I had my stop at this 40.85 level is because I knew it was a major breakout point, which if you missed, I went over on the pre-market live. When you see something like this, guys, so this is a really good introduction to this. If you don't know anything about candlesticks, right, this is kind of who I'm making this video for. This is called a wick, right? So this massive, top of the candle that you see here is a wick, right? And when you see a big wick like this at the top of a candle, that means there's severe selling pressure, right? And while it may be hard to see this, right when it happens, when you go back and review your charts at the end of the day, like we're doing right now, this is some of the most beneficial reviews that you'll have, right? This is kind of what's going to make the difference between who succeeds and who fails as a trader as a whole, right? In the long term are you going over the charts, after the day is done and understanding where your mistakes were, right? And, that's why I like the 30-minute in this instance, because it can be extremely helpful to review. And honestly, I've been using the 30-minute a lot more lately. When you see a massive wick like this, guys, what this is illustrating is that when it hit this price point, there was a ton of selling pressure down, right? So there's a difference, right? When you see a big candle like this, right, versus a candle, such as we saw, leading in at the, right, 1-2 o'clock hour, right? We see you see a full bodied candle like this. When you see a candle like this, like compared to some of the others we saw today, there's a ton of volume on this candle, right? And not only is it off the open, right, but we're seeing this major selling volume come in at a certain price point, right? So obviously in the future, we know that this 42.84 area was a major resistance on Riot, right? Because what you're seeing is the selling volume flush the candle down, right? And look where the body of this candle ends, right? Which is at that 40.85 level, which I mentioned was key, right? And oftentimes you'll see this is as soon as we broke down, we saw even more selling pressure push Riot all the way down to the 37.58 level. This was the reason that I stopped out of the trade at the $41 level, right? Is because I didn't want to hold this down. And I knew that if we failed that breakout off open, that we were going to see a move to the downside. And what you're witnessing here on this candle, right, is an exact illustration of that. The body of the candle found support at the $37 level, which I mentioned. So it's important to note how the candle can kind of tell a story, right? The top of this candle and the wick, right, is telling us that there was a lot of selling pressure, right, off of that level. And when we saw that level break down to the downside, we saw when you see a full body, see how there's not a big wick at the bottom of this candle, guys. You see how the wick is very small. It means that there was continued selling pressure even to the downside throughout that entire $3 price point, right? So from the 40.85 level all the way down, through the $38 level, we saw just continued mass selling pressure on Riot this morning, right? And so that's, even though, maybe you were on the wrong side of this trade, maybe you're on the right side of it, it can be extremely beneficial to go back and look at this and say, okay, when I see a candle like this forming in the future, I'm going to kind of have an idea of, where this is going, right? What chart do I use? This is the 30-minute chart that I'm looking at right now, guys, if you're following along from home. And so I wanted to start with that because I think it's, extremely beneficial to see a sell candle like this. And this is one of the most important candle formations, or the concept of the candle to understand, right, is when you see a big wick like this, guys, and oftentimes you will notice, right, and I know this is a little bit more geared towards the beginners, right, but when you see a big wick like this, that is telling you that there is big sell pressure at a certain price point, right? And there's a fantastic example on the Fastly chart, right, from earnings. And we're going to look at a little bit, larger of an overview. I kind of want to look at the daily, right? So you can see, guys, I'm not sure if you remember last week, but Fastly gapped up off earnings, right? So it had earnings on the 3rd. We saw a big gap up after hours, but we saw a massive selling pressure, right? It actually hit $64 after hours. Let's see if we can see. We actually hit $64 after hours on Fastly. This is going to be a fantastic example because it's going to show us, right, when you see, even on something that has positive news, right, this is dictating the psychological behavior of, people either trading or investing in the stock, right? It's just whoever's buying, selling, the wicks of the candle dictate our behavior at certain price points, right? So on Fastly, from a broader overview, this is right after earnings, right? The night of earnings, initially off of the earnings, right? People perceived it as positive. We saw a major move to the $65 level, but we saw this massive wick, right? And I want to illustrate this because I want to look at what happened more on a longer time frame after we saw this. But, right, we see this wick at the $65 level, right? It kind of continued, tried to regain that level, couldn't, right? And look what happened on the daily. Even though this is we're looking at the hourly currently, and we're seeing this massive wick at the $65 level. Looking at the daily after this, it's kind of, and And as you can tell, Fastly had major resistance at the $65 level. It's not a coincidence that we saw a massive wick there. Look what happens after we see that massive wick, right? On the daily even, right? When you see that type of behavior on a stock, even on a longer term time frame, you see the next day we gap down heavily, right, to our next support level. And that's not a coincidence. When traders see massive selling points like that, even on longer time frames, it is extremely bearish, right? Because it means that, okay, well, we hit this certain price point, but people couldn't get around the fact that Fastly should be valued at $65. So therefore, we sold off super hard. And not only did we sell off super hard initially and after hours, right? We saw that selling continue into the next day, right? And so it's really important to understand how these charts act, after they see a certain price point, right? And there's hundreds of examples for this. I'm trying to illustrate the examples that can tell you stories on different time frames, right? And I know a lot of people may be a little bit more new to trading that are attending this stream right now, because if you've been trading for a longer amount of time, you kind of know what candlesticks are and how to read the wicks and things like that. It can be tricky, and I understand that, and that's why I'm trying to detail this from a beginner's perspective. So you can tell me in the live chat, are you guys kind of understanding the upper wick and understanding how that selling pressure is showing on the chart? Is that kind of making sense? Yeah, even if the candle's green, a big wick on the upper part of the candle, like we saw in Fastly, right? Let me go back to it really quick. Even though this Fastly candle was green, right? Like theoretically on the hourly chart, we still saw massive selling pressure. As you see, the body of this candle, right, is all the way down here. We saw a $10 wick almost, which is, like I said, in the longer run, extremely bearish to reject a price level that hard, right? It doesn't really matter. I mean, oftentimes you'll see a wick like we saw in Riot today, right, where the candle was extremely red, right, after we saw that. But in reality, even when you see a massive green candle like that, yeah, well, it might have been, we might have gone up in price on that time frame on that candle, but in reality, selling pressure still, was outweighing us, right? And, it's just kind of very, very important to understand what that wick is going to dictate. What time frames do I use? For candlestick patterns, I try to review my time frames on charts that I trade frequently on the daily and hourly time frames. If I'm just, right now, right, like if it's this time of night and I'm kind of looking at, okay, like what do I want to trade tomorrow? I'm going to look at the hourly time frame and then to the daily time frame, and I'll go to my daily time frame to obtain levels and see where the stock has had resistance in the past, couple months, or right. And then if I need to, I'll go out to the weekly, right? So the weekly is going to be your much larger time frame, right? The daily is going to be, right, the past like 70 or to 90 days, right? Like the daily time frame is going to kind of give you a good overview of what the recent, past, couple months have dictated for this chart, right? And if you look now on Riot, right, if we look at the daily chart, this is definitely a pretty bearish candle, right? So like even though we broke over this resistance, this isn't exactly the type of candle you want to see, right? Like this is, you're kind of facing some serious indecision and definitely a hard reject off of the $43 level. So yeah, absolutely. So let's look at a firm, because I think that this is another good one to kind of talk about, how to read candles well, right? And I kind of want to go over the Affirm chart because it can give us a pretty solid example. Give me 1 second. I'm going to switch this. Sorry, guys. I just had to switch the lighting a little bit. So I kind of want to get like I'll look at a firm as a pretty good example, right? And somebody was asking, how do you like see what a bullish candle looks like, right? So this is a fantastic example on a firm. This is on the daily chart. And what we're looking at here, right, is you'll see that a firm, once it broke out, right, and we're going to have a bullish example here and a bearish example. And this is, again, on the daily time frame on a firm if you're following along. You'll see this candle, which is right here on the 4th of November, right? We broke over resistance at the 166 level, right? And what you're seeing here, and I'm going to remove the level quickly so you can see, this is a very bullish candle, guys. The reason being is you see how there's not really a major like upper or lower wick, right? It's a very full body candle, which means the price action or, the buying pressure or the pressure of, buying or selling is very much in one direction, in this case, buying, right? And after we saw this extremely bullish candle and a move over all-time highs, this candle right here, right, we see this is called a hammer candle, right? Which means while there is indecision, oftentimes you will see a breakout to the upside or the downside, right? Because this is indecision. But because we saw a major bullish candle before this, we saw a break to all-time highs, and then this is a very bearish candle, right? We see a major wick to the upside, it sells down hard, and then the body of the candle, right, leads us to a much lower move the next day. So this is a fantastic example of seeing, what a very bullish candle looks like and what a very bearish candle looks like, right? This is another example of a very bullish candle on the daily time frame, right? When you see a very full body like this, right? There's not a huge wick at the top. Oftentimes, if you see a huge wick at the bottom, that means that buyers bought up the dip, right? So if you see a huge wick down to a certain price level and then people buy it up, that's a very bullish sign, right? It means that there was so much buying pressure that move to the downside level was so quick that it got bought up very quickly. So when you see a major, a full body candle like this, that is very bullish for continuation, right? And if you're looking at a larger time frame like this on the daily, after we had this candle, right? This was at the 134 level. This was from back in October. On the daily chart, we saw, a 35-point move from that candle, right? So looking at candles on daily time frames can be extremely helpful if you like to swing, primarily large caps, because, small caps, the actions can be a little bit more weird. But on like a large cap swing, if you had been swinging this, you would have seen this breakout candle like this on a firm. If you would have entered off that candle right at the 137 level, you would have had a 40-point move to the upside in about, 2 to 3 weeks, right? So it can be very helpful to understand how candles can be dictated on various time frames, right? When I look at a daily time frame and I see candles like this, almost always, right, the volume is going to match up. So as you guys know, I have the volume on the bottom of my chart here on Webull. And oftentimes you can see extreme buying pressure comes in with those candles, right? And oftentimes that'll be because there's news or the theme is hot or whatever, but understanding that daily volume is so important to trading. And that's honestly a completely, it's another video for another day, but, understanding how to read candles on daily time frames can be extremely helpful, in understanding the general trend of a stock, right? Yeah, volume is super important, and that is a totally another concept, right? Is you guys know that I like to trade things that have really good volume on the daily chart, and that's kind of why I haven't been trading a firm as much, right? Like you guys can tell, I traded a firm a ton, long and short, in this area, right, from September to October, and the reason being is look at the daily volume, right, compared to the volume that we're seeing now, right? We're seeing maybe a third of the volume we were seeing on some days, from September 9th to September or to mid-October, right? We were seeing such good daily volume that there was a lot of trades to be had because the volatility was so good, right? And when the volume tails off like this, it can be much tougher and the action can be a lot less smooth, right? You'll see a lot better liquidity. You'll see a lot more, key levels are holding kind of to a much tighter range and things like that. So I like to trade things that have really, really good daily volume. And a good example of that, just to touch on it quickly, is LCID. Look at the daily volume that we've seen on a chart like this has been tremendous, right? Like if you look at it, from a ratio perspective, look at the daily volume that we're seeing. It's pretty clear down here, right? Look at the daily volume from the end of October, all the way to September, right? We saw the highest daily volume we had, I think, was 116 million, right? And then in the past, week and a half, we've seen all of that volume combined from 2 months, right? And so we've seen a lot, more clean trades. Things have been setting up a lot more, precisely, right? Like we've just seen a lot better opportunities on the stock. Yeah, and volume definitely always does precede price. So honestly, I always recommend, guys, if you're trying to understand how to read volume and how it's going to affect the candlesticks that we're seeing, I personally like Webull. You can use, whatever you'd like, but this kind of tells the story. This on the Webull chart, right? You'll see this. It'll give you the daily volume for each day in and of itself. And you can always compare that to, okay, well, how much volume have we been trading 2 weeks before that, right? Or the week of, right? So today, obviously, lower daily volume on Lucid, a lot more selling volume, right? As a whole. And, overall, guys, it's really important, like I mentioned, to understand how this is going to affect the price action that we see. Do I use a scanner to find what plays I take? No, I do not. I have pounded the table on this, guys, but I trade the same 20 to 25 stocks every single day. And, when I have one-on-ones with people, I tell them that one of the best ways to become more consistent in trading, for me, one of the biggest transformative periods I had was just trading Riot for a 2-week span, right? And I traded it over and over again, long, short, calls, puts, right? And what that taught me is that if you can trade one stock really well and learn the key levels on it, you can bring that, what you've learned on that one stock and apply it to other stocks once you get comfortable. But being comfortable with a stock, it's like being comfortable with a person, right? The relationship you have with that person, or in this case with that stock, is going to be a lot more conducive to the results you're looking for when you are comfortable, right? And when you have a good relationship with it and when you understand it, because stocks are just like people. They have personalities. You've probably heard more than just, a person like myself talk about it, but stocks have personalities. And the sooner that you learn them and understand how to trade them, it's just going to benefit you even more. If you set up your Webull watch list, you can look at the average volume, and then you can, I believe, set up pre-market volume scanner as well. So, and like I said, I think just to touch on what I mentioned just now, I mentioned that in my, how to chart for beginners video, but again, stocks are like people, guys. That was one of the biggest concepts for me to understand, was that the past behavior is the best indicator we have for how something is going to behave in the future. And like I said, understanding how something behaves can be extremely beneficial in trading it. That's why you don't see me go and trade just, random tickers on a daily basis, right? Like I like to trade the same 20 to 25 names. One other thing that I do want to talk about today, guys, we've kind of mentioned, reading, the wicks on candles, how daily volume is going to affect the candles that we're seeing, right? It's really important also to understand on the shorter time frames, right? And so for this morning, I kind of want to look at the Riot trade again, right? And because that was I'm sure, again, many people were in, and so I think it can be very beneficial to learn from it. let's look at the shorter time frame, right? So as you guys know, off the open, if you were wondering, yes, I do like to trade the open. I like to trade on the 1 minute for the first few minutes of the open, and then I'll switch to the 5 minute if I'm still in the trade right after 4 or 5 minutes off the open. And this is why Riot was a little bit tricky today, right? So off the open, this first 5 minute candle was extremely bullish, right? We saw this big move to the upside, full bodied candle, no major upper wick or anything like that. So that's what I'm looking for, right? Like if I see a major wick to the upside, my caution sensor kind of goes up. I'm like, okay, I need to keep a tight stop on this. It might go against me, etc., right? But after this candle, right, we saw the Tesla sell-off really take shape. And when that happened, we saw a extremely full-bodied candle to the downside, right? And this is kind of when I stopped out of the trade. As I said, if we saw a 5 minute close on Riot under the $40 level, that was going to be my stop, because I knew that if we closed under that level, then we were probably going to see a move to the downside. Should I probably play puts on it? Yes. Did I feel confident enough that Tesla wasn't going to reverse? Probably not. Clearly not, right? Because I didn't play the short side of Riot. But on this trade, I think this is a fantastic, the most recent example, right? This is fresh in our brains. And does it hurt to talk about? Maybe if you're a little bit newer. For me, I took a bath on this trade, guys. I was heavy in this trade. I had about $30,000 in the trade. I ended up losing about $11,000, or I own like maybe $10,000. I lost like 24%. So was it fun? No. But the reason that I kept my stop tight saved me from losing a lot of money, right? And when it broke below this $40 level, look what happened, right? Even though the candle that closed under the $40 level after, right, we retested that level, we saw a continued downside move afterwards, right? So when we couldn't get back over the $41 level and close, we see like a very, clear trend, right? Full-bodied candle to the downside, full-bodied candle to the downside, full-body candle to the downside, right? And, like I said, guys, using candle closes and kind of understanding what that means, and I know this is, again, very beginner, but understanding where a candle closes can be extremely helpful, right, in determining the general direction, right? And this can be tricky, right? Because you can see a candle close under a key level, and then you'll be like, okay, well, we're getting a, full-bodied candle to the upside, and then you'll see the true move, right? Kind of show its true colors, so. But yeah, guys, I think that's a fantastic, more recent example to go over. So hopefully that kind of makes sense as to why I stepped out of the trade and why, I saw what I did see and why I exited, right? So this would probably be another good example. I want to go over this super quickly. This is a fantastic example. Is VLTA this morning, right? And you guys saw that I tweeted about 2 minutes after the open that I exited VLTA. And why did I do that, right? So as you can see, we had a major upper wick, which is a huge selling pressure on the 5 minute off open today. If you look at the hourly chart, actually we can look at the daily for VLTA because I think it's been a while. But I knew there was going to be, readjust here. As you can see, guys, I mentioned yesterday today actually on the pre-market live that we were going to see some big resistance in this $13 area on VLTA. Why? Well, we've had really strong resistance at that price point, right? As you can see on the daily chart, we had a lot of trouble getting kind of over this area. We saw a move to 14, but we had a huge wick. And then this $13 area was a major resistance back in, the end of September. What do you know? Right? Today we saw a move off open, and what was I looking for? I said on pre-market live I was looking for a move to 13, and what did we get? We saw a move to 1267, I believe. Yeah, 1266. And so that was kind of my signal to exit, more than half of the trade, right? I want to lock in not only my capital that I put into it, but a little bit more, assure that I'm green on the trade, and then have a stop on the rest, right? Which is usually at my average or, slightly above. So Yeah, so if you're having trouble understanding like what time frame to use, when the market is a little bit hotter like it is now, I tend to use the 5-minute chart more often because it can, it illustrates a pretty good picture while giving you, the 1 minute is just, you're going to drive yourself crazy looking at the 1 minute, right? Because there's so much indecision. You have no real general direction. The 5-minute is a fantastic starter point. If you're in a trade that's you're trying to let it work a little bit, like AMD today or things like that, you can use the 30-minute. But, you looking at the 1 minute all the time or only the 5-minute, you're going to shake yourself out and psych yourself out thinking that the trade is, it depends, at the time you're trading, right? Like if you're trading off the open, then you might need to use the 5-minute. If you're letting a trade work like AMD in the middle of the day, then you might use the 30-minute, right? It just depends on what time of the day you're trading and how much volume there is. When there's more volume, you need to use shorter time frames. So that's a pretty decent overview of, the beginning understanding of how to read, Sorry, guys, my voice is still not 100%. I don't think it's ever going to be again. I think that this is just a nonstop. Mans is just going to have a scratchy voice for the rest of his life. It's okay, though. I love the live streams. I can upload a watch list to the Discord that'll have just all the stocks that I trade on a daily basis. But tonight, what I wanted to do is go over, really how to read, candlesticks from a general perspective, guys. I probably need to do a more in-depth video, but I know that there's a lot of people that are definitely more on the beginner side of learning how to read a chart and learning how to read candles. So I wanted to go over kind of like the bare bones basics of, what do wicks mean, how to read the body of the candle, right? And I think that is a fantastic starting point, right? Like I don't want to overwhelm you guys and start talking about, bullish engulfing candles and all the different, type of candles to look for. Bare bones, you need to understand wicks at key levels are huge, right? Whether bearish or bullish. If you're seeing, massive buying pressure come up from the bottom of the candle or massive selling pressure come up from the top of the candle, you need to understand those because I find those are the most helpful in learning, the general trend of the stock that I'm in, or, having it be a signal to exit, etc. So I wanted to go over that tonight, guys, because I think that is extremely good foundation, and it was a fantastic foundation for me on how to learn to read the chart better and understand, okay, this is going to dictate the trend for me, right? Overall is, if we see a massive wick off the open, right? That can really kind of set the tone for the day. So that is what I wanted to go over on the candlesticks for tonight. I went over a kind of more general view of how to trade the trend, right? Even if you see a more bearish trend forming off the open, knowing when to stop out is just as important as knowing when to take profits, right? So exiting that trade on Riot today, while it hurt for a second, ripping the Band-Aid off and taking the loss and getting on to the next trade is always the best move, right? So why did I take a short position on coin? I felt like it was really overextended going into earnings, and I think that FTX has gained a lot more people are switching from Coinbase because the fees are so crazy, and I know they have a lot of good things going for them. I'm long on coin in my longer term portfolio, but in the short term, I knew that there was big resistance at this $380 level. I saw how they were baking in a massive move to the upside on premiums. And, therefore I took the puts at close because I felt like we might see a downside move tomorrow. Just kind of the general market sentiment was everything was cooling off. I didn't think earnings was going to be like blowout. I thought we would see a good run up, which we did. We played that to the upside on Monday yesterday, took 70% on calls, and then tomorrow, hopefully 300 to 400% on puts, right? So yeah, I don't know if we're going to see 262, but, on the hourly tomorrow, what I'm going to target on coin is probably, I think we're going to see a pretty decent bounce in this 300 to 305 level. I think that 301 is a fantastic target off open. If we really see a move down, I think that 293 ends up holding. I'd be surprised if we broke below 293. So what is my average on the coin position long term? I think 273 right now is my average on coin. I think maybe 263, 273. I got to double check. I don't look at my long-term portfolio every day, but 263, 273, right in that range. So I have about 2,000 shares long. So, all right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and call it a night on the candlesticks for tonight. Like I said, guys, there's so much more to candlesticks, but I think that learning the upper and lower wicks is a fantastic foundation for understanding them. Like I said, I think that one of the biggest mistakes is trying to overwhelm people with too much all at once. Those have some have been, the most important trades that I've taken in my career I've seen, have sometimes been dictated by an upward wick or a lower wick, or understanding how the candlestick is dictating the trend. And that's kind of what I wanted to go over tonight. So in the future, I will do another video that is more in depth, but like I said, I know there's a lot of people that are kind of newer to this stuff. So I wanted to give a good basic foundation for the video tonight. So course, hopefully you guys gained a lot from this. I cannot wait to do another one in the future. We will have a new YouTube video coming out soon that is going to hopefully be right up your alley if you enjoyed this stream. So I will see you guys tomorrow morning on Pre-Market Live. Hopefully we'll get some better market action tomorrow, but I will see you guys either way. We are going to bank and have an awesome day tomorrow. Be well, guys. I will see you guys first thing in the morning. Take it easy.